Dog by Daniel Pennac, chapters 25 and 26. Too good to be true. Hyena never made a mistake when it came to train timetables. He had a sixth sense. Wild Boar always found Dog and Hyena waiting at the end of platform 6, and all three of them would head home, happy to be together. In fact, they were so happy, Dog began to wonder if it wasn't too good to be true. It worried him. It was too perfect to last. Not that Wild Boar and Hyena had any such doubts. They seemed to think it was perfectly normal to be happy. Dog watched them carefully because they'd grown so used to each other. They didn't need to show their affection anymore. Not much, anyway. Hyena would discreetly wag his tail when Wild Boar arrived, and Wild Boar would vaguely stroke Hyena's head before talking to him as naturally as if he were picking up the thread of an interrupted conversation. The happier they were, the sadder Dog felt inside. How strange, he thought. Perhaps there's something wrong with me. But he couldn't shake off the feeling. He watched Wild Boar pick up his paintbrushes and look at Hyena out of the corner of his eye. While Wild Boar daubed the first colors onto fresh canvas and Hyena found a flattering pose, horrible images floated across Dog's mind. They were always the same, the fridge door spinning in the sky, Black Nose's body abandoned in the garbage, the dog pound van, Woolie's last look, the corpse of that other dog on the hard shoulder of the highway. The same visions kept haunting him, and they made him feel ashamed. He didn't tell Hyena about it because he didn't want to spoil his happiness, but you couldn't hide anything from Hyena. "What's the matter, Dog? You look worried." "Oh, it's nothing. I'll be fine, really." "Well, if you're sure." Hyena didn't probe any further. Experience had taught him that when Dog couldn't stand it anymore, he'd tell him the whole story. Which is, of course, exactly what happened. One day, Dog couldn't stand it anymore. He'd fallen asleep in that painfully happy atmosphere, and his nightmares had come back to haunt him. He woke up yelping so loudly that Wild Boar squished 3 tubes of paint in his huge hands, and Hyena bristled like a pincushion. Hey, what's going on? What's the matter, Dog? Tell us. Say something, for goodness sake." "The thing is," panted Dog, I'm too happy here with you. It feels like a dream. Real life isn't like this. It's something else, something completely different. It's full of run-over dogs on the hard shoulders of highways and dead dogs abandoned among the rubbish. It's full of black vans and dog pound directors with blank smiles. It's full of puppies who get drowned because they're ugly. That's what real life's like. The thing is, I keep thinking you're both a dream. And I worry I'm going to wake up on the highway or at the bottom of a garbage dump and I'll die there, all alone, like a dog. I'll die like all dogs die, abandoned by their owners, because there's no such thing as friends. It's all a pack of lies. Owners are the only people who exist. Owners who think we're stupid and ugly and a nuisance when we take too much time sniffing smells, who strangle us with their leashes and squash us with their cars, who abandon our corpses and leave us all alone while cars just keep driving past. And so on. In a never-ending lament, it was a cry for help from far back in the history of dogs, a cry that could have risen up in the throat of any miserable dog on a sad evening. Wild Boar stood there, his enormous hands caked in paint that was oozing down onto the carpet. He kept looking fugitively at Hyena if to say, "Come on then, do something, for heaven's sake." But there was nothing Hyena could do except wait. When Dog had no more breath left in him and he'd emptied his bag of unhappiness, he just stood there. His heart was pounding, his legs were buckling, his throat was dry. The tip of his nose was on fire. Hyena waited until Dog was completely numb and helpless. And then he said to him, "Follow me, Dog. I want to show you something, and you can tell me if it's a dream." He spoke with so much authority that it had the effect of a cold shower on Dog. Hyena had already opened the front door and was waiting outside on the landing. Dog followed him without a word. The Dog's Cemetery. They crossed the city. Night had long since fallen. At one stage in the journey, Hyena ordered, Wait here for me." Dog sat down and waited, but not for long. Hyena reappeared around the street corner, carrying a large bird in his mouth and running flat out. A fat man in a white apron was running after him and shouting, "Stop, thief!" in a rasping voice. Passerby laughed. Hyena swept in front of Dog's nose like a whirlwind. Dog paused for a split second before hurling himself at the pursuer's leg. There was a great cry, followed by a sound like a jumbo jet making a crash landing. The night sky spun underneath them. Dog bounced back onto the pavement. Without pausing to think and still feeling very dazed, he ran after Hyena, who had just disappeared around the other corner. Once he'd caught up, Dog started asking a whole heap of questions. He was very excited. "Where are we going? What are we going to do with that bird? Do you think that man in the white apron is dead? Are you listening to me? Where are we going?" But Hyena was walking in stealthy silence, his jaws clamped on his prey, and the sparkle in his eyes even brighter than usual. Finally, they reached the river. They were on the outskirts of the city. Factories rose up behind the yellowish curtain of light from the old street lamps. Water flowed past, black as the sky above it. A garnishly lit, lowish curtain of light water flowed past, black as the sky above it. A garnishly lit bridge cut through the darkness with a dazzling shaft of light. Hyena seemed to hesitate for a moment. He frowned, and his pupils narrowed to the size of pinheads. He was looking in the direction of the light shaft. Dog watched him. All of a sudden, Hyena's eyes fixed on something. Dog followed his gaze, and then, for the first time, Dog saw it. Over there, at the other end of the bridge, a dark mass of trees rose up out of the water. They were gigantic trees, and despite the rumbling from the city, Dog could hear their leaves rustling. They were shaking their foliage over a little island in midstream. Lit from underneath, their leaves sent out short, slivery messages into the night. Hyena continued his journey. Dog followed him up onto the bridge between the high walls of dazzling light. It was the first chance he had to get a proper look at the bird. What a set of feathers! He could see gold and a red that was redder than he had ever imagined, and dozens of other colors that were even brighter than wild boar's paints. Dog started asking questions again. "What are you going to do with that bird? What breed is it? Are you listening to me? Are those feathers real or fake?" Hyena still didn't answer. He walked with his head held high and his neck straining under the weight of the bird, which was even bigger than Dog. Finally, they reached the end of the bridge and stood in front of a stone archway. There was an inscription high up, but Dog couldn't read it. The cast iron gate was wide open, beckoning visitors inside. But Hyena didn't go in. He took 2 steps forward, put the bird down between the 2 pillars of the archway, and then backed away to sit down and wait. Dog sat down next to him. "Where are we?" he whispered. "At the dog cemetery," Hyena replied without any sign of emotion. "What are we waiting for?" murmured Dog, who was torn between wanting to go inside and the impulse to scamper off. "We're just waiting. You'll see." It was dark beyond the archway. Cloaked in shadow, the cemetery looked empty. You could just make out a statue representing a St. Bernard, with a cask of rum around his neck and a child held tenderly in its enormous mouth. The wind sighed. Water splashed against the banks of the island. Dog and Hyena had been waiting for some time when a cat suddenly appeared. It was a beautiful Egyptian cat with a long, muscular, sand-colored body. She seemed to have been born out of the darkness. Dog jumped out of his skin and started to growl threateningly. "Be quiet," ordered Hyena. The cat sat down in front of Dog and Hyena and watched them without looking the slightest bit worried. In fact, she seemed completely at ease. She waited for Dog to calm down before picking up the bird by the neck and dragging it inside the cemetery. Then, and only then, did Hyena give the all clear. "Let's go." The cemetery wasn't as dark as it looked from outside. Here and there, light from the bridge shone through the lower branches of the trees. It fell on the graves at oblique angles, like shafts of sunlight in a cathedral. But the dark night hemmed them in. There were all kinds of graves, from huge monuments to tiny square headstones. Some were made of marble, others of granite or concrete, and every sort of name was inscribed on them. In the gold letters were names like Rex, Prince, Baron, and Tarquin. Carved out of stone or painted directly onto concrete were Buster, Lassie, Fido, Ruffles, and Lucky. Hyena read their names out respectfully, together with loving words their owners had inscribed underneath. To our friend Ruffles, you'll always be in our thoughts. To my dearest Hal, a trusty companion in good times and bad. Farewell, Tarquin, my grief knows no bounds. Dearest Buster, a nobler character than I could ever be. And so on. Between all the graves covered in flowers, tall, strong trees had sprung up. They're not really trees, remarked Hyena. They're dogs who've been changed into trees. But what surprised Dog most was the number of cats roaming around the cemetery. You'd have thought it was their kingdom. One of them, a black cat who was slim and lithe and serene, was making a pretty picture with her claws in the sand, surrounding a grave pink porphyry decorated with feathers. Dog immediately recognized the feathers. That's right, said Hyena. Human beings look after our cemeteries and decorate it in the daytime, but it's the cats who take over at night. And a very good job they do, too, he added, nodding toward a pair of yellow eyes not far off, staring unblinkingly out of the darkness. There was a flowery grave immediately to the right of the cemetery gate. It belonged to a dog without an owner, who had decided to sleep, at last, in the cemetery of happy dogs. Dog wanted to take another look around. Hyena agreed. Dog wanted Hyena to read out the names carved on the gravestones again. Hyena did a roll call of the dogs in the cemetery. Dog wanted to hear the epithets again. Hyena read them out. Dog wanted to go around a third time. Hyena refused. No, he said. We've got to get back. They headed toward the exit in silence. Human beings are so unpredictable, thought Dog, or something like that. And so are cats, he added, or something like that. But he couldn't think clearly. He couldn't talk, and he felt woozy and giddy, as if he'd been anesthetized or hypnotized, and his feet no longer touched the ground. They reached the gate, and on the subject of cats, there was one sitting there. It was the Egyptian cat. Hyena sat down opposite her, and Dog followed suit, at which point the Egyptian cat winked very clearly, nodded toward a corner of the cemetery, and walked off with her tail held high, which is what all cats do at meal times. Let's follow her, said Hyena. The Italian has just invited us to supper.